Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Dr. Joey interviews Christian business professionals just like you to discover their secrets for working faith positive in a negative world. Welcome to Faith Positive Radio with Dr. Joey Fawcett.
Faith Positive Nation, one of the most powerless things that we do as we get old enough to have children is to parent. I mean, it is absolutely powerless. You do the best you can. You hope that there's enough chlorine in your gene pool to take out all of the parts about yourself that you don't like, the parts about your spouse you don't like. But still, your children take on habits and things like that aren't of your choosing, which makes it powerless, right? Today, you're going to love this episode, Faith Positive Nation, because today we're hearing from a dad and a son who figured out what it takes to get your life back in order when the wheels have all run off of the car, right? And so I want you to help me greet Dr. Kevin Fall, who is daddy to Austin T. Fall. The T is for Tyler, because the Fall family spent some awesome time in Texas, right? Shout out to all of our Faith Positive Nation friends in Texas. And so they've written this incredible book, How to Get Your Son Back. And it's on Amazon. You'll find it in the episode copy. The link's right there. But today we're just going to hear all about the story and about I think, the miracle that God did in Kevin and Austin's life and helping bring their relationship back together, help Austin find his way back into where he needed to be as a son of God first, and then secondly, as Kevin's son, and about the amazing transformation that took place in Kevin's own life as he began to prioritize and really look at his importance in the role of serving his dad to Austin. So Faith Positive Nation, help me welcome Dr. Kevin Fall and his amazing son, Austin Fall. Guys, thanks for being on the show today.
Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Oh man, we are so excited to have you. So who wants to go first, launching into this incredible story? I guess, Kevin, the thing that struck me as I read your one sheet is you were working a couple of jobs, 80 hours a week, and a grad student all at the same time. So you don't need sleep. Is that what was going on there?
Boy, I didn't get much, I'll tell you that for sure.
No, couldn't have.
I was going through grad school at age of 43. I was getting my PhD in psychology. I'll go back to the backstory of that. But like you said, I had really reconstructed my life. You're talking, a lot of people will say, our kids don't come with a manual. We have to learn on the fly. But I'd like to suggest that sometimes we do come with some hardwired parenting skills that we get from our parents. And for generations unknown, my parents had passed down these abusive ways of disciplining to me. And my mom and dad loved me dearly, and they were very good Christians and are the reason I have a strong faith today. But boy, when push came to shove, they used abusive tactics. And so I did the same thing with Austin and his younger brother, Alex. And, when that's used on you, your sense of self and the way you look at yourself is not good. And that really dictates almost everything we do in life. So I did a lot of repair work on my life and discovered some things. I was a IT consultant making good money. Everything was going well in my life except my relationships. I was divorced twice. I was really what I thought was damaging my sons in the way I was parenting. So I went to work on myself and discovered such amazing things that I decided to get my PhD in psychology. And then one day I was in my first semester working my tail off, and I get a call from my son, Austin. Austin, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, so I hit rock bottom. I wasn't living for God at all. I drank all the time. Alcohol, marijuana, you name it. I mean, it was a complete disaster within my life. And I already had problems, underlying medical problems that were yet to be diagnosed. And so you could imagine how those factors, that factored in with abusing alcohol. And so I was growing more and more depressed. I eventually dropped out of high school And then I got a GED, returned to my hometown. And that was actually the first time I went to live with my dad. I didn't have enough self-confidence to make it go the first time. We talk about that in the book. But so I moved back and got a job at a brick factory in my hometown. And I just grew more and more depressed. I didn't want people to know how ashamed of myself I felt and how inadequate I thought I was and how undeserving of a good life I thought I was. And so I used several different tactics to deflect attention away from the shame I felt. And a lot of that included hurting others. And so I grew more and more depressed, and I eventually became suicidal and made a plan, pretty elaborate plan. And before I decided to execute that plan, my father and mother's face kind of appeared in my imagination, and I made the phone call to my father.
Wow. So really that was a visitation from God to you, wasn't it, Austin, to think about the implications of what you were planning?
Yes, it was. It was. I certainly did not want to hurt my parents. I couldn't imagine making them endure a lifetime worth of suffering just for my selfish behavior. And I knew there was more I could do. There had to be more. There had to be a little bit deeper I could dig, and to not hurt my parents and not take kind of the coward's way out.
So what was driving all this for you? Because that's a depth of despair at a very early age that, you just don't wake up one day like that. What was driving that for you?
No, I drank all the time. After work, I remember I had a half gallon of vodka, like McCormick's, some terrible thing that would just gag a maggot.
So it wasn't even a pleasurable experience getting drunk, huh?
No, it was awful. And so I just started coming home from that brick plant. It was a monotonous job. They kind of just churn and burn their employees. And I just got more and more depressed, and life at this time wasn't living for God at all.
Right.
And so it was really, really just kind of a day by day, just incremental decrease in satisfaction with life. And I got to that point, it was like, this is the end. I can't go anymore. And I actually looked my boss in the eye and I said, I just can't do this. And he's a hardened guy. And even he saw that I was totally gone and burnt out from my eyes, and didn't ask any questions when I resigned.
Man. So the good Lord intervened and said, hey, call Dad. So Kevin, you get this call from your son. Does he out it and say, I'm thinking about taking my life?
Yeah, that's one thing that Austin and I, as I was doing my growth, I'm going to go back just a second, and then I'll answer your question. At around the age of 12 and 13, Austin and Alex, they were 12 and 13 years old, and I had just gotten my second divorce. And I was moving back from the Washington, D.C. area to Kansas City to be closer to them. And I wanted to kind of hit the reset button in our relationship. I talked about that in the book. But I set them down and I go, I'm no longer going to yell. I've been out of control, and I apologized for that. And it was a heartfelt apology, but apologies are cheap unless you follow up and do something about them.
Yeah.
And I think the boys were kind of taking we'll wait and see type approach, and I don't blame them. The second thing I said to them is, you're both men now, and I'm going to let you make your own decisions, but I'm also going to let you have the consequences for those decisions. And whatever happens, I'm going to love you, and I'll help you if you ask, and I'll guide you, and I'll make suggestions to you, but you're responsible for your decisions. And so there was a real shift there, and a lot of pressure off of me. With Austin, this was a gradual decline that began in first grade, and it just got worse and worse. A lot of violence, and it wasn't that you mentioned it at the beginning of the show, and this is a really critical point about how I think today sometimes parents want to be their kids' friends.
Yeah.
And that wasn't what I was doing with this strategy, but it was taking a different strategy of when he called me and I'm in my first semester, and I'm thinking, what was my reaction? It was, oh crap.
Yeah, really.
How am I going to do this? Because I literally was killing myself in grad school. And of course, being the dad, and I said, of course, come down. I'm going to help you any way I can. And so he comes down, and he's left all of his friends. He's a high school dropout. His sense of self is very low, very game-based, and was actually hanging out in the apartment as I finished my finals, and then I had a few weeks to get him ready for what was next. And I said to him one day, I go, Austin, you've left everything behind and you're scared to death. I want you to know something. I left everything I knew behind. I quit my job to do what I think God wanted me to do. And I have no guarantees that this is going to work. No guarantees at all. And this was his strategy, if you go back to the conversation I had with him at 12 and 13, was that I am going to go from being a coach on the sidelines with a clipboard yelling at them to joining them as a leader on the field. And I think that is a lot of people will hear what I'm suggesting to them. They'll go, so you're just saying I let them do whatever they want? No, that's not it at all.
No.
I suggest you join them in the game. Austin, and that's what I was doing. Austin, I'm scared to death too, because I don't know what's going to happen with the gamble in my life.
Right. Yeah.
So
I'm taking a big risk here too, Guy. I know where you are.
And I think this is the point I want parents to get, working parents. You heard John Maxwell talk about positional leadership. Positional leadership. I'm the dad. Austin, you will do what I say. I'm going to lay down the rules, and it's either my way or the highway. And we know how effective that is. I mean, Austin, that wouldn't have worked with him at all. I'd tried it.
Part of why you were where you were, right, Austin?
Exactly. But here I changed the dynamic to, I'm in the game with you. And it's a scary game, and there's no guarantees. So in order to perform in this game, you've got to be your best, and I've got to be my best. Let's do it together.
Wow.
And that dynamic is an incredible dynamic I hope parents will consider.
Wow. And it's, man, it works, obviously, because Austin got his life back. But, Kevin, as you're talking about that, I'm thinking about that's the way God the Father did with us, right? He came down here on the field. I mean, he got on the field with us. He could have kept that positional leadership and said, I'm God, you got to do what I say to do, right?
Right.
That's my God voice. But anyway, he could have done that from heaven, but instead he emptied himself, came down here and hung out with us, right?
Yes.
Taught us everything we needed to know. And then talk about a risk. Wow. He let us kill him. The ultimate risk, right? And then that resurrection power conquered death. So, man, I love what you're talking about in terms of getting on the field with your kids, just like God the Father got on the field through Christ the Son with us, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, Austin, what's your reaction? Dad saying, look, I'm out here with you, man. I'm taking a big risk. I don't know where all this is going and how it's going to turn out. I mean, you expect, the stereotypical image of your dad is, I've got all the answers, son. Here's what you need to do. But you didn't get that.
Right. So there wasn't so much of a safety blanket or safety net because he had given up such a lucrative career to work now 2 jobs that didn't pay near as much, plus volunteer at a homeless shelter, plus obtaining a PhD and all that goes with that. And there's a lot. You start working on a dissertation, and that's just a lot of work. And so I knew I had to drive this, and this had to be changed. I truly wanted for myself. And I had to start seeing myself as a productive member of society who could do anything. And I slowly started getting my confidence back and doing things that were going to advance the agenda I wanted for my life. And I started to value myself more. And with his leadership came a lot of self-confidence. And that self-confidence has just morphed into a lot of great things for me. And I don't think my dad will ever know truly the impact he had on my life.
Wow. So you discovered that you could act and make things happen, and they were good things.
Yeah, I think you have to act. When you're stuck in the mud, you have to act. You have to dig, claw, and do anything you can to get yourself out. Praying's one thing, but you have to act too. I think God wants us to act and do the best we can as well.
Absolutely. He didn't say sit on the front porch and pray and you'll receive. He said ask and you'll receive, and then seek and you'll find, right? So you got to get up, put some feet to those prayers. So what was the turning point for you? I mean, when did you figure out, hey, I can have a goal to act towards? Because that's where it starts, right? It starts and stops in your head.
Right. So I watched my father's incredibly great leadership. He would come home and he turned a food pantry into an office. So he's just like kind of wedged in between like the cabinet, this little hole. And so I kind of examined my life and compared it to his. And although I'd made some changes, I was still going out, using alcohol way too much, probably being a little bit too promiscuous in a college party town. And so I took a look and I'm like, wow, my dad did all this for me, gave up everything he had, that career, to go get a PhD, all in the name of helping people. My life is really worthless the way I'm living it now. And so that inspired me to want to change.
Okay. So you saw Dad's example and said, hey, that's my dad. I belong to him. I'm in a relationship with him. If he can do that, I can too.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted for myself. I wanted a higher meaning in life.
Kevin, you can't give your kids that want to, can you? Kevin, right? Austin had to come to that on his own.
You're exactly right. And, I remember standing in the kitchen in our apartment. We were when we were college roommates. And I remember he was standing right in front of the refrigerator. And he looked at me and goes, Dad, I just don't know that I believe in God.
Wow.
And I have a lot of Christian friends that whose kids are exploring other, their faith, and I don't believe we parents should panic at that.
Yeah. But inside you're freaking out. What do you mean, son? You don't believe in God, right? But you can't say that.
Yes, but I have a lot. What takes more faith? For me to sit there and argue with Austin and try to bend him back into believing, or to believe that God will use me as an example in our conversations to bring him back.
Man,
and today,
that's huge. That's the most important thing I've heard all day. Trusting God enough to lure your son back into a loving relationship with him, that it's not your job. You're not in control of that. You're not God. That's beautiful, Kevin. Thank you.
I'm not. And I gave Austin a lot of examples that I wasn't God.
Some of them intentional and some of them unintentional, I'm sure.
Some of the late nights in that tiny food pantry, he heard my temper go off more than once. But, that's what...
Temptations are born with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
More blood.
That's right. Yeah.
But, I really trust God to take us in the right place. And, today, Austin and I are having our planning meetings, and he'll say, we've got to have God lead us. We've got to be praying.
Wow.
And so the faith that he has come to is his own. And, he had some spiritual abuse in his background, and he's come to his own faith, and he continues to, as do I. But, I think too often we as parents, we're so impatient. We're in an instantaneous society. And the prodigal son's father, he seemed to have some patience there.
Oh, he did. He stood at the head of that road every day for all those years, staring into every cloud of dust, wondering if that was his boy coming home.
Yes. And he loved him.
Yes.
Both before he left and when he came back.
That's right.
And I think even when I love hearing you talk about Christ at work through us. And that's my paraphrase.
Yes. That's what it's all about. We get to share that message. You get to share him at work, right?
That's correct. And I hardly ever mention God unless the other person brings him up. But I really have high expectations that if I love them with a pure heart, just be to them because I want to, not because God tells me to.
That's it.
because God's wired us that way, and I want to. And the same way it goes with Austin. I mean, Austin knew I loved him and had his back.
Mm.
I'd just like to encourage parents to be patient with this, because Austin didn't turn on a dime. We lived together for 5 years. But what I would watch was his thought process change over time.
Mm-hmm.
And come in telling me, Dad, I think I'm wasting my time drinking and going to bars.
Wow.
And I wasn't. The worst thing I could have done, I think, is, well, then why are you doing it? Stop it.
Yeah. Or when you see him out doing that, say, son, you're wasting your time, right?
Yeah.
But instead you let him have that aha moment.
Yes.
Yeah. And little did you know that example was the most powerful thing that you could communicate to him, because what did Austin say earlier? He's watching you. And our
Yes.
kids are always watching us, aren't they, Kevin?
Yes. And I tell you, sometimes we try to bring that positional leadership of home from work. And when I think what Maxwell talks about, the influential leadership, we lead by our life.
We really do. And it's so easy for us, both as parents or as Christians in the workplace, to judge first rather than love first. And where does that get you? Certainly Christ didn't do that.
Right.
He didn't look up at the tree at Zacchaeus and say, dude, if you were a believer, I'd invite you to dinner. But, instead he's going that Mary Magdalene. I mean, just look at who he hung out with, all these people that others were judging. And that would have never brought Austin around to becoming who God intended him to be if you'd just judged him and jumped on his case all the time.
No.
To judge rather than to love. So, Austin, I got to know, in these planning meetings that you're having, right? Why is it so important to you for God to be up front and first?
Well, because I feel like this is a calling and something bigger than myself. I know I'm going to get old and die, and it's going to happen in a relatively short period of time. Time goes so fast.
Oh, man. 30, so. He has no idea yet, does he, Kevin?
I'm starting to get an idea. It's like I took a nap and woke up at age 30. So it's kind of where someone would have woken me up.
Right. That's right. Went to sleep and woke up when I was 70, So,
yeah.
That's hilarious.
It kind of actually
important to be strategic, right? Because our time here is brief.
Yeah, I just do want to do the best I can to help people. And Dad and I gave up a lot to do this. And we have this belief, a strongly rooted belief, that if we do the best we can with pure hearts and make God the focus of what we're doing, the money will take care of itself. Kevin, that's got to warm your heart to hear your boy talking like that, because
it does.
That's exactly what Christ taught us, right? You can't serve God and mammon. So, but he also said, when you serve God and seek his righteousness first, all these other things will be added to you. And that's what you understand. Austin, what would you say to a parent right now whose kid's acting out? Whether your drug of choice was alcohol, whether it's some other drug of choice, promiscuity, bullying, whatever. What would you say to a parent right now that they could do one thing to help their child the most?
First of all, I would say reestablish your relationship with them. Go be closer. And because to gain influence, it's like what we talk about in the book. My father first apologized for his shortcomings as a parent and kind of articulated his vision for the future and how he saw his future as a parent with us. First, work really hard to get that relationship back so you can open up channels of communication first. Otherwise, in all likelihood, your teen is not going to be receptive to a dialogue, or a monologue, I should say.
Yeah, or a diatribe, right? So how did your dad work to get that relationship back with you? What I hear you saying is he apologized. He said, look, I'm human. I blew it. I want to start over. I want to do over.
Yeah, so he apologized, and at first I was this apology was out of the blue. He took us out to a restaurant, set us down, and apologized. And so I'm kind of thinking, wow, this is interesting, and much of it,
different, right?
Yeah. So a couple months down the road, and I just noticed this extreme shift in his behavior. He's acting really more interested and involved in our lives, kind of nudging us in the direction of us finding our passion, kind of asking us the deeper, more meaningful questions in life. And the fact that he moved, we talk about this in the book, from the East Coast to the Midwest to be closer to us in rural Kansas. That was a big move from around a suburb of Baltimore to Kansas City just for us. And he showed us we were important with action. His words, I mean, words are pretty cheap. Everybody just, wants to talk.
Right.
That really he delivered in a big way.
Wow. So it wasn't just, hey boys, I'm sorry.
No, it's much more. He led by example. He's done that throughout his life. That's been a consistent pattern of his behavior. So I'm really grateful for it.
So what was this pivot, this come to Jesus moment about, Kevin? I mean, did you just wake up one day and say, I got to do something different, or did something happen?
It was after my second divorce. And I guess in chapter 4, we talk about don't let your son waste a good crisis. There's real motivation in that crisis.
There is. So the crisis for you was the divorce.
Yes. And of course, I tried to have other relationships, and who to thunk it? I had the same patterns happen. How does that happen?
Yeah. Are there no good women out there? Oh, wait.
Yeah. What's wrong with them? And so I went to work on myself. And, one of my beliefs is Jesus, I don't want to get into the theological discussion of original sin and so forth. But I think Jesus came to tell us that we're okay. God made us good. But we have so many things happening to us in our lives, like my parents, their example and the way they disciplined us, that I had a terrible sense of self. And that's exactly what I believe Jesus was, his underlying message is, you're forgiven. You're good enough.
Yeah.
Go love other people. And in there is such a great promise. So it was discovering that I'm lovable. And in order for me to accept that God loves me, I got to love myself. Otherwise, I can't even imagine it.
Well, God can only love us if we receive the love, right?
Absolutely.
You can't pour water into a vessel with the lid on it, right? You got to open up your heart and receive that love. If we could just see ourselves the way God sees us.
Exactly.
As redeemable people who, sure, we screw up, we sin, call it what you will. It's like bologna, slice it thick or thin, it's still bologna, right?
Yes.
So we live outside of a perfect world, but nonetheless, God sees us and loves us enough to send his own son to us. We're back to suspending judgment, only this time it's self-judgment, right?
Exactly.
And that's really where I learned how not to judge you, is I learned that God's not judging me. He's loving me and wants to be in that loving relationship with me. Wow. So that was your turning point, when you realized that even though a second failed marriage, you could still be lovable.
Exactly. And it's that how we view ourselves. I've done my research has been in this area. And it's not the fact that I see myself as a piece of garbage or dirty or you fill in the blank.
Right.
Our problem then becomes in the relationships is I defend myself against other people getting up next to that. Because nothing is more painful than you telling me I'm a piece of garbage and me knowing it. And so,
you state the obvious, man. Tell me something else. Right. I don't want to hear that, though. I have to defend my turf, right?
Exactly. And we anticipate each other stepping on our turf. And it's those defense mechanisms we have against that great shame that we develop that causes our relationships not to work. Because in my abuse with Austin, it wasn't that he was a bad kid. He was just being a kid. But he was making me look like a bad parent in a really bad relationship, and she might leave me if things don't get fixed.
Oh, wow. So it wasn't about Austin at all. It was about you.
No. And so that was a turning point for me. And as I started discovering, and it took a number of years for me to change that self-view. I looked at Austin, and here's this tough, strapping young man,
Mm-hmm.
and you could just see the self-loathing perspective he had of himself,
Mm-hmm.
and it was driving his behavior. And so that was our project as we lived together as college roommates, is, Austin, you are lovable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Austin, what was that like being a college roommate with your dad? I mean, most
Let's
guys...
change the subject here.
I know he hung out in the food pantry all the time, so eating for you was a challenge because you couldn't get in the food pantry to get anything to eat.
Well, yeah, and I had to duck in to make sure he was showering. Like, he spent a lot of hours in there.
And he never changed the sheets on the bed or anything.
It was interesting. I tried not to be a liar, so I just kind of wanted to avoid coming home in the morning. I didn't really want to face Dad. Hey, Dad, you're pretty drunk last night, and had to a few times. I mean, you got to come home at some time, but I mean, it's, you know, I'm in my 20s, and, you know, his stipulations were let him study and don't drink and drive. That's pretty broad, and I was pretty fair to me. Yeah. And so I did my best to just respect the effort he was putting into getting this PhD, the time, money, and effort. And I pretty much just respected that. And it wasn't bad. Dad and I got along really well. I thought we had some really deep conversations, and really introspectively and interpersonally, I grew from watching my dad get a PhD. It's kind of interesting.
Talk about influential leadership. Wow. That's awesome,
Kevin. If I can just interject something real quick, and Austin will chime in. We lived together for 5 years, and we had some very, very serious discussions. And some of them were a little emotional, but not once in that 5 years did we fight. And when I talk about fight, I'm talking about unproductive conversation. Our conversation, and it was very productive, but it was sometimes very hard too. And that's what I want to encourage parents to do when they're in the game with their child. And they've apologized, they've reset the relationship. They can have those very difficult conversations about boundaries and enforcing boundaries. And we had some really good conversations. And you know what? Austin got through to me as much as I got through to Austin sometimes.
So you're teachable as well.
Oh my goodness, yes.
See, that's a huge characteristic of positive parenting, I think, is that we learn from our kids. In fact, I wrote a book called Listen to Life with Your Child, and it's all about things that our girls taught me as they were raising me. There was a whole lot for this daddy to learn, and I'm a better person today from having parented. So I'm delighted to hear that you're teachable. So were some lessons harder for Kevin to learn than others, Austin? I mean, did you kind of have to drill some stuff into him? You don't have to answer that.
No, I think the hardest thing to drill into him is he was just so much more sophisticated and advanced. See, I dropped out of high school originally, and then I went back to get a GED.
Right.
And then I went to JUCO before transferring to the University of Iowa. And so getting up to speed on studying and schoolwork was a challenge, and I don't think he realized how much of a challenge it was. And so his expectations, I think, for one class were perhaps too high, but I kind of just said, Dad, I wish you could be in my shoes for 10 minutes.
Wow.
I wish you could spend 10 minutes in my shoes to figure out how hard it is to focus. And we go into the facet of our book that deals with mental health and how that helped me. And that's, as Dad would tell you, that would vary on a case-by-case basis. But
Sure.
It was definitely beneficial having my dad around to guide me through that process. That's for sure.
Man, as parents, we have to get that drilled in our heads. They're our kids, but we're not them and they're not us. And so there's X factors in there that just affect learning, affect emotional growth, relationships, everything. Right, Kevin?
Oh my goodness, yes. That example he was talking about I wish you could feel what it's like to be me. Here I am studying psychology, and I've gone through my own growth. And And I'm thinking, if he just has a good enough attitude, if he just has more discipline, if he just does what I do,
Right.
and there he is telling me I can't do it. I heard that, and we went, and medication was necessary.
Yeah, just to focus, right?
I would have missed that. And as we developed our relationship, I think we add a lot to our sons and daughters' self-esteem by asking their opinion. I depend on him now. And even back then, I started asking him his opinion, not as everything's got to come from the heart. Everything's got to be authentic. And I think it has a tremendous impact on our children's lives. They certainly can teach me stuff.
Oh man, yeah, and realize that they're a little more than just an extension of ourselves. That they have their own hopes, wishes, dreams, desires, and our daughters are adults now, and they're experts in their field, and and so we turned to them and asked them for assistance. Of course, for us, it started pretty early. I think when our older daughter was 8, she was programming our VCR. For us, it started early. But isn't it amazing that God puts us in families where we can learn from each other and we can grow together? And so there's seasons where parents are teaching children, and then later where children are teaching parents, and then we really grow together. I love the way you guys relate to each other and learn from each other. Kevin, I absolutely admire your influential leadership and your openness to learning from Austin and really treasuring him as God's son as well as your son, and seeing him as a young man he is. And Austin, man, your transparency is just refreshing, because your journey, I mean, it was uphill, and you call it and you keep it real. And I just really appreciate that, and the way that you admired your dad and allowed yourself to be influenced by him when most kids, just because it was their dad, would have turned and run the other direction. So your openness to the movement of the Holy Spirit in your life, and just recognizing that in your dad, man, what a model you are for guys who are 30 and trying to figure out what it means to be a young man today. So, wow, hard stuff right here, buddy. I'm just feeling it with you two guys. So, of course, Scripture obviously guides both of your lives. I mean, I hear the Jesus in you. I see the Jesus in you. Austin, you got a favorite Bible verse you want to share with Faith Positive Nation?
I would say Corinthians 2:3. It sounds kind of simple, but it's kind of the fundamental basis of our whole of what we're doing here. And it would be set your minds on things above, not earthly things. What we're trying to do here is maximize our effectiveness in helping others to achieve their maximum potential. And I want to do that because to me, that's building up my rewards in heaven and doing what God would want me to do. And I'm not doing this to try to get a private jet. I'm really doing this, and I'm saying this out of my heart. I'm doing this because I truly want to help people.
Wow, man, it shows. The things above, we'll just fill our minds with that. Kevin, what about you? A favorite Bible verse?
I would probably go with Matthew 19:14. The disciples have kind of rebuked the children who have come to Jesus. And he said, wait just a minute, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And that's what if I can use Austin for an example, this fighter, this alcohol drinking, dejected, suicidal kid. And now I watch him play with his daughter.
Oh, you're a daddy now.
And love his daughter.
Oh, wow.
And it's that heart God gave him to begin uncovering it. And that's my mission, is to help us all be more childlike.
Yeah, as opposed to childish, right? Yeah. Which is the easy part for me. Being childlike. Yeah, and Christ was really clear. Unless you become like one of these, you're just not getting in, which is we're back to trust. And as parents, we have to trust our children to God. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, Austin, how old's your little girl?
She's awesome. I always tell people she's the apple of my eye, and I can't wait. I'm going to run up and get her. She lives in Iowa City, so but she is so wonderful. I cannot wait to go up and get her for Christmas. It's going to be amazing.
Oh, that will be amazing.
She's 3.
She's 3.
Oh, yeah,
Man.
it didn't mention she's 3.
Love
so
3-year-olds. Right about 3 or 4, they get potty trained, right? And they can tell you what's going on and what they want to happen in your life, in their lives.
She's got plenty of opinions, that's for sure.
Where does she get those, Kevin? I wonder.
Yeah.
Maybe from her daddy. Yeah.
Maybe a little bit.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, Faith Positive Nation is going to want to reach out to you. So first we can go to Amazon and get your book. So let's see, it's right there on Amazon, and the link is in the episode copy here. So we can go to Amazon and we get your book, which is entitled How to Get Your Son Back, right? And a lot of the principles, just so us dads of daughters can speak out, right? The principles apply to dads with daughters too, and moms with daughters too. So how to get your daughters back, works really good stuff there. So Kevin and Austin, what is the website that we can go to? Because I know there's some places that we can go and learn more.
Yeah, so lifedoctor.com. It's lifedoctor.com.
Okay.
And so if you want to find out more about our consulting, speaking, more about what we do, and that's also a place you could buy the book, lifedoctor.com spelled out would be the best bet.
Okay, awesome. And there are ways of emailing you guys and get more information if we're interested, right?
Yes, certainly.
Okay.
info@lifedoctor.com. And I can also give you a number to call.
Okay.
913-208-7075.
Wonderful. And our super production guy, Chuck, will make sure that telephone number gets in the episode copy as well.
Wonderful.
Kevin and Austin, you have blessed me. You've blessed Faith Positive Nation today. Your transparency, honesty, and ability to keep it real about some difficult times in your lives, and yet how God touched you, transformed you. Kevin put you in a place of influential leadership. Man, for a dad to apologize to a son, that is, as we say in the South, tall cotton, right? I mean, that is just really huge and tells me so much about you. And Austin, for you to listen to your dad, apologize, watch him carefully, let him be in a place of influence over you. And then, dude, I got to tell you, to live with him for 5 years while you're in college, St. Austin, that's got to be you, man.
I'd write a book about that, shouldn't I?
I think you should. 5 years of my dad in college. That's right. That's beautiful, man. And I just love both of you, and I appreciate your hearts. And thanks for sharing your story today.
Well, God
Thank you,
bless
Dr. Joey.
Thanks for listening to Faith Positive Radio, the Christian business coaching conversation that increases your faith with greater joy at work so you love God and others more. Suggest guests and ask questions when you email Dr. Joey at info@getpositive.today. And be sure to get your free gift of the 5 positive business conversations to have today coaching program at getpositive.today. Until next time, may God bless you with everything your heart can hope for and more than your mind can imagine.